Soave, what's on your radar?
Let's get to it. Representative Ilhan Omar is speaking out regarding the massive welfare fraud that occurred in Minnesota, her home state, under the watch of Governor Tim Walz. Because the vast majority of the fraudsters are Somalis, and because Ilhan Omar is herself a member of that community, well, she appeared on Face the Nation over the weekend to answer questions about the accusations made by many conservatives. Trump administration figure Stephen Miller, for one, has said in the wake of the scandal that the entire Somali refugee program is predicated on a lie. Destroying your own country does not give you the right to become a citizen in ours. Miller, of course, would like to have no immigration from the third world whatsoever. But here is what Omar said about the welfare fraud scandal.
Why do you think this fraud was allowed to get so widespread?
Well, I want to say, this also has an impact on Somalis because we are also taxpayers in Minnesota. We also could have benefited from the program and the money that was stolen. And so it's been really frustrating for people to not acknowledge the fact that we're also, as Minnesotans, as taxpayers, really upset.
Look, I don't know. If I was her, this is what I would have said. I'm outraged that anyone in my community would pilfer from the public. I want all the perpetrators brought to justice. They are giving us a bad name, and I won't stand for it. That's what I would have said. Moving on, next, Margaret Brennan asked Omar about whether the money had been sent overseas to fund terrorism.
How confident are you that that's a false claim?
I'm pretty confident at the moment because there are people who have been prosecuted and who have been sentenced. If there was a linkage in that the money that they had stolen going to terrorism, then that is a failure of the FBI and our court system in not figuring that out and basically charging them with these charges.
Really? She's going to begin by indicting law enforcement? Now, I should be clear that the authorities have not verified that the money sent overseas made its way into the hands of any terrorist groups, particularly Al-Shabaab, as alleged by conservative writer Christopher Rufo, who was the journalist who broke the fraud story in the first place. But the authorities have only recovered about $50 million of the estimated $1 billion that was stolen. Again, here's what Omar should have said. I am aware of allegations that the money went to a terrorist group, and I support the federal government fully investigating this. It's unacceptable that a single cent of stolen taxpayer money be sent anywhere abroad, and I will do everything in my power to make sure my constituents are made whole. Now, you're probably wondering, am I looking for a job as a speechwriter for Ilhan Omar? In fact, I am not. Obviously, she can speak for herself. I am speaking, actually, as someone who does not appreciate the casual racism being lobbed against innocent Somali immigrants. The focus of the welfare abuse story should be the failures of the Tim Walz administration. Walz, you may recall, was Kamala Harris's choice for vice president. He's demonstrating just what a disastrous vice president he would have been. It's been reported, not just by conservative writers, but also by the New York Times, that he ignored whistleblower complaints about rampant abuse of welfare because it was a pandemic, and he thought, well, it would be too heartless to ask questions. Of course, that's the kind of leadership that allows thieves to flourish. Now he's facing a total collapse in confidence of his governance, even as he seeks a third gubernatorial term. If Republicans remain focused on what a bad job he's doing, maybe they could even dethrone Walz. Or maybe this will just be part of their case come midterms or the next presidential election, that the Democratic Party is not fit to actually govern, that they're weak on fraud, that they can't be trusted with public funds. If this becomes just about racism against Somalis or accusing all foreigners of being bad people, this is quickly going to become a losing issue for the right. Yes, I know it's very popular for some reason on social media to routinely disparage all immigrants from the third world as some kind of drain on our country. Look, I won't even bother trying to convince people who harbor those actually racist views against Somalis that they're in the wrong because it will likely be a fruitless exercise. But conservative pundits who actually have an interest in retaining power and winning elections should stick to criticism of what I described, Democratic governance, Tim Walz, not stigmatizing all immigrants. Even if Ilhan Omar's very basic inability to react to this scandal with anything approaching a savvy PR response makes it very, very tempting to go in the wrong direction, please don't do that.
Interesting stuff, Robby. As you would expect, there's parts of it that I agree with, and parts of it I don't.
My invective against racism, I suspect you agree with.
I do strongly agree with that. I was going to interject when you said that you're not planning to be Ilhan Omar's speechwriter. That would be a job to which I would be much more suited, I think.
I think so.
No squad member left behind.
I think so.
On here. Look, as far as the fraud's concerned, that fraud is wrong. It is serious. There's one woman who apparently is planning to plead guilty who herself defrauded around $14 million. That's wrong in itself. It's a problem for the welfare system in Minnesota, and there are certainly political questions to be asked of Tim Walz. Kidding aside, I do appreciate you calling out the racism that has been directed at the Somali community and the attempt by some to kind of collectivize guilt in that respect. What I would say is it's not only a matter of people in the sort of nether worlds of social media. President Trump is referring to Somalis as garbage. That is a racist attempt to blanket a term across an entire group of people. There are others in the conservative movement, including people who hold elected office, doing the same thing. Briefly on the point that you first raised about how Omar answered those questions, and the first one, which was talking about Somalis being victims. To my mind, what she was trying to do there, I think fairly enough, was to get away from this perception that there are regular Minnesotan folks here and Somali folks here, and these people are, as a group, defrauding these people. And so she was talking about the fact that there are obviously lots of members of the Somali community who could have benefited and did benefit legitimately from those programs, who are now, firstly under an unwarranted cloud of suspicion, but also deprived of the benefits of money that for those people to whom it could genuinely have helped.
Right. And I think the reason this story is resonating, because I understand some people will say, oh, okay, this is a group of, I think largely second generation immigrants. Most of the people involved were their parents had come over. They were, one generation removed from the immigrant experience, and a large amount of fraud in this community. How could people come to our country, or their recent ancestors come to our country, and then rob us blind? And that makes people angry, and I understand that anger. It's helpful to keep in mind that this is not the first time welfare fraud has been committed. It has been committed by every class of people, from the poorest of the poor to the CEOs of large corporations, that in my mind is no less fraudulent when they get bailed out for their bad behavior. I was on the two-way show that I do with a bunch of people from across the political spectrum, including Nina Turner, who has a very progressive left viewpoint. She was pointing out, we were talking to a caller, and who was very upset about the story and saying, well, are you upset that the Pentagon has failed however many audits in a row? Think of the hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars that they've lost, that they've just misplaced. Same taxpayer money, gone. Or maybe it was used to buy weapons that are sitting unused in Eastern Europe or in the Middle East to fall into the hands of a hostile foreign power or a terrorist group. Are you exercised about that? And the caller said, well, yes, of course. So I think it's maybe helpful to explain to people that it's not just this one group of interlopers who have done this. It's unfortunately far too common, and we have far too few elected officials who are paying close enough attention to it.
Absolutely. And just before we wrap, I do want to defend Omar in a separate clip from the ones we played that's causing a lot of controversy, where she compared Stephen Miller's rhetoric to the dehumanization of practiced by the Nazis. I think that a lot of the rhetoric used in that respect is very redolent of that othering of people and suggesting that society's been hollowed out from within.
You note that I didn't select that clip to play and criticize.
I did.
For that reason.
Exactly. And I thought, to your credit. Robby, let's get started. What is on your radar?
Well, Niall, the debate is over whether it's permissible to destroy alleged narco-terrorists in the Caribbean without a formal declaration of war by Congress, and that has prompted some members of the tech community to make an even bolder statement about violent repeat criminals shouldn't just be killed, they should be publicly executed. So that idea was proposed on social media by Joe Lonsdale, a venture capitalist. He writes on X earlier this week, if I'm in charge, later we won't just have a 3 strikes law, we will quickly try and hang men after 3 violent crimes. And yes, we will do it in public to deter others. Our society needs balance. It's time to bring back masculine leadership to protect our most vulnerable. He opined on this topic following an X thread in which TPUSA spokesperson Andrew Colvett asked for Secretary of War Pete Hegseth to blow up even more drug smuggling boats in the Caribbean, and Hegseth responded, "Your wish is our command, Andrew. Just sunk another narco boat." How rugged and masculine. Quillette editor Claire Lehman responded that it was grotesque to broadcast such bloodthirstiness, even if the strikes on the boats were ultimately necessary, which prompted Lonsdale to disagree, saying that sinking narco boats publicly helps deter others, as does hanging repeat violent criminals. Lonsdale then called for the public executions of even more criminals. Lehman pointed out that there are those on the left who think tech CEOs are themselves criminals due to their obscene wealth, and we ought not to create a precedent of violent revenge against our perceived enemies, to which Lonsdale and some other people said that she was missing his point. So this exchange caught my eye on X because I think the conversation could benefit from considering an additional point of view. Now look, many Americans are quite concerned about rising crime and disorder, as am I, and do want the government to do something about it. Republicans in particular benefit from the impression that Democrats fail to govern the states and cities they run, and that those municipalities coddle criminals and make life worse for citizens by refusing to make the tough choices. In that vein, one can see the appeal of the tech CEO's pitch. Don't just stop coddling criminals, but execute them in some horrific public fashion, sending a message to all other would-be lawbreakers. Well, it's a solution that fits in well with the tech CEO approach of discarding unhelpful customs and simply doing what works, supposedly. Move fast and break things. But here's an important fact. Trying to scare the criminals into not engaging in crimes actually doesn't work out so neatly. That's because it isn't severity of punishment, a public flogging, that disincentivizes criminals. According to the research on this subject, and it's very useful to peruse it, what actually works to disincentivize crime is certainty of punishment, not severity, certainty. And it makes sense if you think about it. Most of us aren't criminals, so maybe we can't get into the criminal mindset. Those who do resort to crime are a special class of risk-taking people. Think about inner city crime. The people who mug pedestrians or steal cars, they're seizing what they believe to be convenient opportunities. If you started publicly executing people for those crimes, you wouldn't actually stop people from committing them. Many carjackers would still take that risk, thinking, well, they're the guy who's too clever to get caught. See how the human brain works. That's how gambling works. But if you bring the carjacking conviction rate to 100%, then research shows you actually would reduce the likelihood of someone engaging in this crime. The opportunity seems like it's no longer there to them. We can apply that lesson as well to the alleged drug boats in the Caribbean. We don't need to blow them all up and murder everybody on board. We need to interdict the drugs. That is the law enforcement role. But if we're simply killing them all, then what we're really talking about is warfare rather than law enforcement, and for that, we do in fact need congressional oversight. Don't take my word for it. Even Laura Loomer has been confused about what the administration is doing. Yes, I'm citing Laura Loomer positively. Yesterday, she posted on X, 8% of the drug supply into the U.S. comes from Venezuela, and it's not fentanyl. The fentanyl is actually coming from Mexico. Good point.
Yes, it is, and I always enjoy when you get your libertarian instincts to the fore here.
Public executions, Niall. What could go wrong? I know your bloodlust is cannot be easily.
Exactly,
defeated.
easily. No, that more public executions. I find it so bizarre that these people are around, like Lonsdale, and regarded as people to be listened to, talking in these terms about masculine leadership being represented by like mass public hangings. Right. The idea, I mean, these people I think have a very insecure idea of masculinity for a start, that you need to go around hanging people and doing that sort of thing in general to prove that you're a real man. I think that's
law enforcement
nonsense.
Should be impersonal and dispassionate. Mm-hmm. It should be the system giving people what they deserve based on our rules. And again, there is a role to have more enforcement. And the social psychology research here, the public research, is very valuable, and it shows this over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. When the conviction rate is very high and the punishment, it should be swift as well. The system being mogged and you waiting years and years and years before your case actually gets handled, that's not so good. We want swiftness and certainty of punishment for rule breakers, for law breakers, and then that does actually have an effect on crime. Making it the punishment more grisly doesn't do anything, because the criminal mind, these people who engage in this behavior have a warped sense of what they're able to get away with anyway.
Well, to that point about the swiftness, I mean, I just don't agree with the death penalty, period. But of course, one of the issues with those who purport to believe that the death penalty causes a deterrent is because we correctly don't want to execute people wrongly,
years and years and
it
years.
takes like decades. So that part is thwarted as well, just as a general matter. For example, states that have the death penalty typically have a higher murder rate than states that don't. And so the same principle applies internationally as it does domestically. And I just find Lonsdale, you know, he's like co-founder of Palantir, friend of Elon Musk's. He was involved in that Barry Weiss University, and now coming out with this stuff about public hangings when I'm in charge. He's like some sort of like AI-generated right-wing tech.
What about public hangings when you're not in charge?
Right. Well, exactly. And someone
what you'll get someday.
And someone did. Well, I think it was Claire Lehman. Made that point too.
He then derides as a leftist. She's not a leftist at all. She's like a classical liberal libertarian type due process obsessed person like myself.
Yeah, and actually, not to get into the media too much, or the media element of it too much, but she's someone who has gone up in my esteem over the years. I thought that she was just a sort of reflexive right-winger.
When she was bashing woke and then she was consistent about it.
Exactly. Now she's coming to a more normal.
This is another example of what I've said, or someone else said this and I've just recycled this or stolen this thought. I can't remember who said it first. Social media just being your intrusive thoughts. Like, we've all been very, well, maybe not you. You're such a calm man, Niall.
No.
I've been in an angry fight with you.
Sure.
Kill Niall. I could tear him apart limb from limb. That's like in my head, right?
Yep.
You don't need to share your intrusive.
More filters.
Yes.
More filters are good.
Just leave it internally. You don't have to put everything you've ever thought on social media and then wonder why you don't look so good.
Exactly. Self-restraint. Robby, lead us off. What is on your radar?
Here we go. The European Union has hit Elon Musk's X with millions of dollars in fines, and conservatives are very angry about it. And in my view, they're right to be upset. Now, President Donald Trump isn't happy either. Here he was bashing the EU.
Whoa, that's a nasty one. I don't know. Elon has not called me to ask for help in that one. But no, that's a tough thing. I don't think it's right. No, I don't think it's right. I don't see, how they can do that. No, I'm not. I'll speak about it later. I'm going to get a full report on it. Look, Europe has to be very careful. They're doing a lot of things. We want to keep Europe. Europe is going in some bad directions. It's very bad for the people. We don't want Europe to change so much. They're going in some very bad directions. That was a big thing.
I'm with Trump. European bureaucrats who depend on the U.S. for so much, including quite literally our money and our military, well, they should tread carefully here as they sanction an American company and an American businessman for practicing the American values of free speech. Western values, not just American values. Now, in the EU's telling, here is what X did wrong in violation of European policies. The EU ruled that X's blue checkmark system is deceptive because anyone can purchase a checkmark, which in their view enables scams, impersonations, and manipulations by malicious actors. The fine for that was $52 million. The EU also hit X for not making information on political ads available to researchers, which was another $40 million. And then the EU said that X obstructed independent researchers' access and limited scrutiny of information relating to political content and hate speech. The dollar amount for that, $46 million. Okay, but let's be real. The issue is that the bureaucrats of Brussels don't like that X refuses to restrict political speech that government deems hateful or misinformed, and they're looking for excuses to ding X without coming straight out and admitting that their problem is, in fact, the content. Does anyone think the government should be able to compel a social media site to collaborate with researchers who are desperately trying to prove that the site is more evil than ever? Well, of course not. Transparency is nice. Of course it's nice. We can encourage big tech to practice it. But at the end of the day, it's also important for social media sites to be able to protect our data and our speech from unfriendly authoritarian governments. Look no further than the massive push to erase anonymity online, something already well underway in the UK due to the Online Safety Act. If the bureaucrats get their way, well, you'll be fully identified in all your social media posts, and if you say anything unkind about a political figure or a group of people or about the system in general, well, they'll either come after you or they'll come after Elon, I guess. This is why, by the way, that there's no tech industry to speak of in Europe. All the most promising minds know that only the U.S.'s regulatory environment gives enough permission to innovators to be successful. But it doesn't need to be this way. I'd prefer if it wasn't America standing alone against China's foray into these technologies, social media, and also AI, don't forget AI. Europe should be right behind us. That's why I think Trump's right to say that, look, it's got to be a two-way street. Europe wants the U.S. to lead, for instance, when it comes to Russia-Ukraine. We're told not to turn our backs on Europe. Okay, that sounds fine to me, I agree. But it means European leaders have to play ball. Free speech matters to us. It's our First Amendment, and we're the superpower. The Western world wants to put on a brave face and work together to oppose despotism around the world. We can't have this one exception where a form of despotism to us is allowed to flourish within the coalition, particularly when it impacts American companies. Now look, in the scheme of things, these are not particularly steep fines. Elon can write a check. Best case scenario, maybe this was Brussels' symbolic attempt to shake their finger at Elon and, I hope, move on from this singular crusade against free speech on X. Because if it escalates much beyond this, it could put the U.S.-European alliance in jeopardy. Elon might not be Trump's top political advisor anymore, but they are still buddies after all. I wanted to leave plenty of time for discussion here.
Yes. I feel there's a European-US chasm running right between us here. Look, I don't agree with that. I think you put the point of view very well. But first of all, the use of terms like despotism to describe what I would consider common sense measures to guard against things like defamation or incitement to violence, while at the same time permitting very free-flowing discussion or debate about political or public life issues, I think it is fine. You and I have different views on things like the appropriate strength of defamation laws and what should constitute that. The other point that I would disagree about is this is not a case that just came out of thin air where European bureaucrats were trying to invent a case just to nail Musk or nail X. There are these regulations in the EU about things like identifying advertisers, knowing who's paying for certain advertising that appears, for example. That was one of the three things that they were caught on. Similarly, the issue of verifying identities and not leaving a vulnerability where people can fraudulently purport to be other people. Those seem legitimate things to guard against, and whether I personally think they're legitimate or not, it does not seem unreasonable to me for a nation, or in this case a federation of nations, to have laws that companies which operate in their bailiwick have to comply with. I mean, the United States has those laws, and European or Asian or African countries can't just come here, set up operations and say, no, we should only be governed by the laws of our native country.
Well, that's true, but then we could say, okay, no more military dollars. Right? We can exercise our influence in the region to say that, sorry, a broader free speech ethos than what the EU is prepared to do. Again, not leaps and bounds different. To your point, despotism, yeah, maybe I'm being very zealous about my free speech, but yeah, it's not the same as communist China or Russia or something, or North Korea. But, I agree with you on defamation and incitement, but it is notable, I think, that they didn't proffer examples. I mean, one can point to examples. There's a famous case of Facebook very much being guilty of a genocide of the Rohingya Muslim population because they failed to take down content that was very inflammatory about those people in Southeast Asia. Those examples were not being offered. What it was examples of, well, I mean, the verification thing is very tricky because X allows you to be verified, but you have kind of an anonymous handle or some nickname, and it's not saying who you are. Again, in America, we say that's Publius is, offering opinions about what the founding documents should say, and it's James Madison, but you don't need to know that. Like, that's kind of part of our history. And then the whole collaborating with the researchers is probably the thing that bothers me most, because some of those researchers are just political activists who want the sites destroyed, including the Global Disinformation Index, a British nonprofit that labeled my site, Reason Magazine, a spreader of misinformation based on falsehoods, based on incorrect information. So, yes, they can more militantly force the sites to take down inflammatory content. We in the U.S. have a slightly different legal regime for social media, whereby in most cases, not all cases, but in most of the cases, the person who makes the post is the person liable for the post, not the platform. And we have these debates about whether that's a good system. That's not entirely the system, because if there's child pornography, it's not just the person who puts it up. You actually have to take that down under the law. If you have copyright violations, you get a time period. You have 30 days to take this down. I actually think that system is a little bit underrated and could be applied to some of these other edge cases that come up, that you'll get a takedown window and you can take it down. So that can allow sites or people on sites to be permissive, and then if they get in trouble, take it down.
Yeah, I mean, I take those points. I don't think those are invalid points to raise. I suppose my heckles tend to be raised by the portrayal of Europe by some of the kind of Elon people in this country, because, they'll say, for example, somebody was jailed for a Facebook post, and you look at the Facebook post and it's somebody encouraging others to, burn a hotel that migrants are in or something. It's like, that's not, that's obvious.
I mean, I think the best criticism of Elon, or of the people making this argument that I've seen on social media, is that, well, the stand against the European Union has been very, bold and courageous by Elon, in my view. The stand against Brazil was like that. But where's this similar strident defense of free speech when China or India or someone else says, hey, we want this taken down?
Yeah, certain countries are too big for Elon to take on, I think. That's basically the problem. Or the markets are too big. Robby, what is on your radar?
Well, is there only one principled person left in the United States Senate? Senator Rand Paul is again making his case. President Donald Trump can have his war with Venezuela, with Venezuela's government, but he has to come to Congress and receive authorization. Why? Because that's what our Constitution demands. Here was the senator.
I kind of like to obey this thing called the Constitution. The Constitution says that war only occurs when it's declared by Congress. The president doesn't have the power to take the country to war. Now, if he does, he wouldn't be the first president to disobey the Constitution. But I think we should obey the Constitution, because I think it makes war less likely. This would be a war of choice. It would be an offensive war, albeit a war to get rid of people most of us find distasteful. But it would be unconstitutional for the president to do this alone. So if he thinks he wants war with Venezuela, he should come and ask for permission from Congress the way it was intended.
Paul is right. This is not complicated. The Constitution gives Congress, not the president, but Congress, the power to declare war. That means our elected representatives need to take a vote after carefully weighing and debating the arguments for or against this war. Then, if the American people don't like the choice that their elected representatives made, we can hold them accountable and vote those people out of office. In the past, presidents have had no trouble securing authorization to conduct wars against actual threats to our country. For instance, after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt asked for a declaration of war, and he got it. It was nearly unanimous, just a single no vote in the House, unanimous consent in the Senate. Congress is not unreasonable. They gave the president the green light to fight Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany. Now, Venezuela is clearly not a threat to the U.S. on the same level. Still, Venezuela's leader, Nicolas Maduro, is a socialist dictator who has immiserated his people. We would certainly be better off with him gone. It may be in the interest of U.S. foreign policy to orchestrate his ouster. I'm open to being persuaded, but Trump needs to actually make that case to the legislature. Our founders did not intend for us to have a one-branch government. It's clear that Congress's duty is to declare war, and then the president is tasked with executing on that vision. A declaration of war against Venezuela would also clarify the status of these alleged narco-trafficking boats in the Caribbean, which might then be legitimate war targets. Right now, we're essentially engaged in what I would consider law enforcement, and thus killing first, asking questions later is just not a proper approach. Now, to be clear, Trump's current course of action of sidestepping Congress is not remotely unique to him. Countless presidents have ignored the Constitution's requirement and engaged in military action without proper authorization. But as Paul has patiently pointed out again and again, that does not make it okay now. Let's watch again.
The fact that 10 presidents have done it incorrectly doesn't make it right. Our founding fathers were united to a person. All those who signed, all those who debated over the Constitution, the Federalist Papers, were unanimous that Congress should declare war. No president should on his own. Now, we have disobeyed that, but we do have the ability, if Congress rose up in a clear two-thirds majority and said no, we could overturn any veto.
Now, imagine if Trump did manage to bring this issue before Congress. In one fell swoop, he could actually shut up all his leftist critics about shredding the Constitution and destroying the rule of law and endangering our democracy. He could be the president who actually did it the right way. Food for thought, Mr. President.
I largely agree with that. We'll get to your closing thoughts in a second. But certainly the idea that Congress has the power to make war and a president does not unilaterally have that power, that seems clear to me. I also think Rand Paul, who would have very different views to me in various other issues, I think those are legitimately things that, he legitimately stands up for his beliefs in this.
Like his father before him.
Yes.
Good old Ron Paul.
Good old Ron. I'm old enough to have covered one of Ron's presidential campaigns. I can't remember, 2008, I think he ran. But in any event, the point, I think, is that part of Trump's reluctance is, I'm sure, just Trump's general instinct that he can do whatever he likes and it doesn't matter. The other part, I suspect, is it seems to me he just wouldn't win a vote, right? Because in the House, where Republicans only have an extremely narrow majority anyway, I would imagine Democrats would vote unanimously against. And so you would only have to win over a very small number of Republicans to sink the whole thing. It's not like even, you were mentioning some like Pearl Harbor in the past, but even in the Iraq War vote, which was very controversial, you had about 80 Democrats in the House, and I think more than 20 Democratic senators vote for it. Turned out to be the wrong vote politically and substantively, but nonetheless there was that element of bipartisanship. Right. I don't think you would get any of that now. And that's not only a product of polarization, it's the fact that people, rightly in my view, see no reason to go to war with Venezuela.
That would be a good sign that we shouldn't do it then.
Yes,
if they won't vote for it, that would be a great reason not to do it. Particularly at a time where the Republican Party's fortunes are fading a little bit. Donald Trump's approval rating is low. The expectation is that the midterms would go badly for them, albeit that's a long way off and there's still time to improve things. The economy is not what Donald Trump promised. Voters who came in to the coalition are not. I don't think they're necessarily having buyer's remorse. I'm not sure they're saying we're so upset that we didn't vote for Democrats. They're just not happy with what is being delivered to them. And this would be a great sanity check that more foreign entanglements would not be a good idea. The Iraq War is a great example of why this should be brought for Congress. It was argued and debated in Congress, and you had, it was not a totally partisan thing. You had many Democrats who did support the declaration of war, and then they could be held accountable later. That hurt Hillary Clinton, that she supported it. That hurt her in her primary race against Barack Obama in 2008. That is a vital component of our democracy because all of these people, it's like their hands are clean. Mm-hmm. They can just wait to see how it goes. They can get the best of both worlds. They can, if it's popular, they can say, "Oh yeah, well we support it. It's great. We love Mr. Trump."
Yep.
If it's not popular, they can say, "Well, I didn't vote for it." That's bad.
Right.
That's bad for us holding them accountable.
And I think that's presumably one of the reasons why, with the exception of people like Rand Paul or Thomas Massie, there hasn't really been a particularly strong push from Republicans to have such a vote because it would place them in a difficult position. They would either have to go against Trump's perceived desires or not. And that is something, that divide is something.
On one level, you'd think I would expect them to be upset that so much of their power and responsibility is being usurped, not just by this president, but by every president in modern times. Really, our founders thought of the legislator as the Congress as the main branch of government. The executive and the judiciary very much side partners, and that has rebalanced to where the president is by far the executive by far the most powerful branch. The court might be more powerful than Congress, frankly, at this point. Congress doesn't care. It's so strange.
It is. It has really ceded enormous power. And of course, not only Trump, but people around him like Stephen Miller are more than happy to grab that power when it becomes available.